I'd like to invite our next guest now on the show. It is Vinayak Chatterjee, infrastructure expert and chairman of CII's National Council on Infrastructure. We're getting him today to talk about the looming coal crisis and the power shortage fears that exist at the moment. We are seeing coal to be in short supply, with statements coming that, there enough coal for only 3 days now left. Vinayak Chatterjee, welcome to the market. This is Nayantara. Good morning.
I know.
It's a double whammy of sorts. More than 75% of the electricity produced in India is up from coal, right? We don't normally import coal, but we've seen how coal prices globally are surging. Domestically, there seem to be logistical nightmares right now because of the rainfalls and just not able to get it out of the mines. What's the way out?
Look, it's clear that the coal supply situation is under extreme stress. And you have alluded to some of the reasons. Actually, the three top reasons are, I think the plants had got used to a certain lower level of demand during the COVID times. And also with the liquidity pressures of the discoms not paying in time, they had tried some, I would say, astute working capital management by keeping coal stocks relevant to the COVID period. Now, as COVID has kind of receded, there has been, as you know, a sudden surge of demand, which is largely being met by the coal thermal sector. So, to that, add to that the fact that extremely heavy rains and flooding in eastern India and central India largely have disrupted coal supplies far more than they usually do because of the very heavy rains this time. Uh, and so therefore this combination of astute liquidity management of keeping relatively lower stocks, sudden surge, unexpected surge in demand, and disruption in mining and supplies have all created what is called the perfect storm. But I wouldn't exaggerate this, because we have been listening to the power minister and other experts in the last few days. India has seen these kind of shocks on the coal sector in the past. This is not something new. I understand from various sources, from the railways, from Coal India, from the power plants, that the situation is being monitored on an hourly basis. So my expectation is that this will kind of, the crisis heightened expectancy or the heightened stress will gradually ease off in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We just have to live with the current, shall we say, cliff edge situation. And it's not that coal is the only industry seeing it. You are seeing this in chips, in the automotive and durable sector, that there is a huge chip shortage that is affecting production. During COVID times, we saw the problem on oxygen. So at different points of time, different industries do go through certain shocks where 2, 3 black swan events collude together. But while I would be concerned, I would not be unduly worried that the coal situation will go out of hand. If at all, it is already showing signs of being handled reasonably effectively. But back to you.
Okay, so you're saying there are hourly monitoring taking place literally as far as the coal supply goes. So that means we're not going to have an energy crisis the kind we've seen in Europe or what has happened in China also?
No, none. This has been, the first thing is that when you recognize it's a crisis, then I have seen that in India, people rally around and try to solve it. When you're in denial, then things get worse. In this case, nobody is in denial. Everybody says, yes, we have a problem, we are handling it, and actually on the ground, it is being handled. Over to you.
Vinayak, is there a permanent demand change in the power sector which we need to now be aware of? Because for the first time, we are going through what could be called as a mega expansion drive. The steel sector, the automobile sector, sectors which in a sense are power guzzlers, those industries are expanding. So it's not that a whole host of power capacity has got added in the last 10 years. It's just that large industries did not add capacity and the power demand in India was maintained. But the reality is very different because the economy is coming back.
I don't quite agree with you, for the simple reason that the low capacity utilization seen during COVID times are creeping up to higher levels. But if you're talking of significant new capacity additions, we are still to see that. For example, while automobile sector is being seen to revive, yesterday at a CII meeting, Vikram Kirloskar, Vice Chairman of Toyota, reminded us that the sales of two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, commercial vehicles are still at the 2016 levels. So where is the question of a certain major increase in production? All that is happening is that sectors which were affected are now coming back to pre-COVID levels. And pre-COVID levels, we had reasonable amount of power supply. Over and above that, please remember that while there has certainly been a planned slowdown of coal thermal capacity, which is very much in keeping with the climate change goals of the country, close to about 100 gigawatts of renewables have been added. And in fact, the problem is reverse, that many coal thermal power plants are actually unhappy that they're being asked to back down when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. They're being asked to back down to accommodate the must-run status of the renewables. So I am not seeing any fundamental change in the demand pattern as you are postulating. Maybe that will happen, and when that happens, we'll see.
Okay. So are we at the turning point where thermal, of course, is large and it is almost 70% of India's capacity, but because of what is happening in the coal sector, because there is a push towards decarbonization, suddenly this entire crisis may just give a leg up for other alternative sources and commissioning may increase exponentially. I'm trying to use the COVID example here, that COVID forced us to innovate on digital front and now that is the new normal.
Well, on this you are right. What I would say is that the most dramatic development that I have seen in the last 3 months, if you look back to your own discussions on energy, even across the months of April and May, how many times did we discuss hydrogen? Never. But come the Reliance AGM, when Mr. Mukesh Ambani announced major plans to manufacture hydrogen and a major entry by Reliance, that was followed up by, in 15th August, the Prime Minister from the ramparts of Red Fort announcing a national hydrogen mission, and most policymakers in India expressing their worry that excessive dependence on conventional battery storage and battery technology for EVs would lead to a large dependence on lithium and other metals where China has a global dominance on the supply chain. India is suddenly talking hydrogen. So if you really ask me, the most dramatic change in the conversation that I have noticed in the last 3 months is the nation, India, suddenly talking about hydrogen as the next big thing, which is actually very, very welcome. And in this case, we're talking about green hydrogen, so that the hydrogen production is from renewable sources. If you ask me, that is the most dramatic development. Over and above the planned capacity addition in solar, which, the target is almost, we are close to touching the targets of that were announced earlier, and there was much skepticism there. So the structural change is the shift to renewables, which was planned. And the other major structural change is the sudden interest, not just across a few corporates, but across corporate India, across PSUs, across oil companies, to get into hydrogen in a big way. That is something we should be now debating, discussing, and tracking. Over to you.
Look forward to those engagements with you on that topic, but right now I'll blend my question into two. First, winter months are approaching. Do you think things would be settled on the power front before the onset of winter, because energy demand patterns, they change in winter? And second, once things normalize, the supply shock is over, where do you see power prices in general would settle? Because for the longest time, corporates have cried that India mein bijli ka price bahut mehenga hai. It is not viable. How do you expect us to be globally competitive?
There are two separate questions. Let me address the first one. I actually see this crisis if I have to call it a crisis, I would see this as a managerial stress point of managing coal supplies in the next few days. It's high stress, but it's not a crisis. And when I say high stress, I am actually expecting this to be over by Diwali. So I would not worry about winter months. Now, coming to your second point, the issue of high energy costs in India is one of the biggest reasons for Indian industry saying that other than logistics, it is high price of power, which is leading to India products being non-competitive. Now, why do we have such high levels of industrial tariffs? Because the discom economics is so warped that we use a system of cross subsidy. It's a Robin Hood philosophy. We hugely overcharge the corporate sector, the industrial sector, and in many states, even the household and institutional sectors, and we cross subsidize the people who are either getting free power or getting subsidized tariff. So unless this cross subsidy is cracked, how do you crack it? Basically, in fact, the new Electricity Act revisions postulate that please earmark the amount of subsidy you want to give to the disadvantaged sectors and give it as a direct benefit transfer, a DBT, so that the power sector economics don't get screwed up. Over and above that, of course, is the larger issue of resetting discom economics. But let me stop here.
Vinayak, just to take that point forward, and we often talk about discoms with you, considering their losses are only continuing to mount and mount more significantly, what really can be done? I mean, how can we reverse their growing losses?
Look, this is a point we have been talking for 20 years. So let me once again reiterate that most of the steps that are being contemplated now are in the right direction. The power minister is making the right noises, making the right changes to the Electricity Act. He's trying hard to get errant states on board, etc., etc. Even assuming that he succeeds, the results will not happen immediately. The results will happen, if at all, in the next 3 to 5 years. So the question before us is, what do we do immediately? I have for a long time been touting a simple solution, which is a two-pronged attack. One, do whatever is you can to incentivize every discom to put in smart meters. That gives you a tremendous hold on billings metering collection, and the sheer act of metering and it being smart will alleviate a lot of pain on the operational side. The second is, who's going to do it? Because putting smart meters also costs money and the discoms are bankrupt. I have for long been advocating that India needs a national power distribution company, and that national power distribution company should offer its services to pick up areas. You can't do the whole country at one shot, but you can pick up pockets that are willing. For example, Chandigarh was tried. The BJP states who are online can subscribe, and they can hand over pockets to the national power distribution company, which will be 100% owned by the government of India, and therefore, let's say as a JV between NTPC and Power Grid and others. So there's no question of selling the family silver. It's only going to go from state discom to a national power distribution company. And this entity can be funded from the budget, and otherwise people like the World Bank, ADB are extremely happy to fund things like smart meters, which are so positive in so many dimensions. So there is no question of getting into the loop of privatization, franchising, and all the problems that we see with it. Immediate solution: set up a national power distribution company, offer its services to put up smart meters, and give them pockets, whether urban, semi-urban, or combination of urban-rural, by states who are willing, and union territories. And let's get going. Otherwise, we will be only theorizing, and theorizing. So this is my short point to a very complicated problem.
Okay, we can have this discussion for hours on the end, but Vinayak, good to have you on the show. Commercial obligations, I'm going to have to let you go on this note. Thanks as always for taking the time out.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.